Seattle, 1964. The University of Washington gymnasium was packed with over 200 people, all seated on folding chairs arranged in a wide circle around a makeshift demonstration area. The air smelled of wood polish and anticipation. This wasn't a tournament. This wasn't a movie set. This was a martial arts demonstration, and the main attraction was a relatively unknown Chinese instructor named Bruce Lee. At the time, Bruce Lee was nobody to most Americans. He had been teaching martial arts in Seattle for a few years, had a small but dedicated following, and was starting to gain a reputation among local martial arts enthusiasts. But to the general public, he was just another Asian guy claiming to know kung fu. The demonstration had been going well. Bruce had shown some basic techniques, demonstrated speed drills, broken some boards, professional, educational, but nothing too flashy. He was there to teach, not to show off. That was always Bruce's approach, substance over style, though he had plenty of both. Then came the question that changed everything. About 40 minutes into the demonstration, during the Q&A portion, a hand shot up from the back row. The crowd parted slightly, and a man stood up. He was big, about 6'2", maybe 220 pounds of solid military muscle, crew cut, squared shoulders, the bearing of someone who had been trained to stand at attention. He wore civilian clothes, but everything about him screamed military. "I got a question," the man said, his voice carrying across the gymnasium with the kind of confidence that comes from years of physical training. "No disrespect intended, but I'm a U.S. Marine. Been training in hand-to-hand combat for 6 years. And I gotta be honest, all this kung fu stuff looks great for movies, but in a real fight, against a trained soldier, I don't see how it works." The room went dead silent. This wasn't a hostile question. Exactly. The Marine's tone was matter-of-fact, almost conversational. But everyone in that room understood what had just happened. This was a challenge, politely worded, but a challenge nonetheless. Bruce Lee stood in the center of the demonstration area, dressed in his simple black martial arts uniform. He was 5'7", and weighed maybe 140 pounds. The size difference between him and the Marine was immediately obvious to everyone watching. David and Goliath, except Goliath was trained by the United States military. Bruce didn't react immediately. He just looked at the Marine, studying him the way a scientist might study an interesting specimen. No anger, no offense, just observation. "What's your name?" Bruce asked, his voice calm. "Robert," the Marine replied. "Robert Harris, 3 tarts, hand-to-hand combat instructor at Fort Lewis." Bruce nodded slowly. "Robert, thank you for your honesty. You're right to be skeptical. Talk is cheap. Demonstrations can be staged. The only way to know if something works is to test it." The crowd leaned forward. "Where was this going? So here's what I propose," Bruce continued, his voice still calm, almost casual. "You come up here. You try to hit me. Use whatever techniques the Marines taught you. Whatever you think will work in a real fight. And we'll see." The room erupted in whispers. This wasn't supposed to happen at martial arts demonstrations. This was supposed to be educational, safe, controlled. Now it was about to become something else entirely. Robert Harris hesitated. He hadn't expected this response. He had expected Bruce to defend kung fu verbally, maybe demonstrate a technique on a willing student, then move on. But an actual challenge, in front of 200 people? "I don't want to hurt you," Robert said. And there was genuine concern in his voice. He outweighed Bruce by 80 pounds. He had military training. He had actual combat experience. This seemed unfair. Bruce smiled, a small, knowing smile. "I appreciate that, but I assure you I'll be fine. Come, let's test your theory." The crowd formed a tighter circle. Someone moved the folding chairs back, creating more space. Robert Harris stepped into the demonstration area, and suddenly the energy in the room changed. This wasn't theater anymore. This was real. Bruce took a position in the center of the space, relaxed, hands at his sides, weight evenly distributed. He looked completely unprepared for a fight. No guard, no stance. Just standing there like he was waiting for a bus. Robert, by contrast, immediately fell into a combat stance, feet shoulder-width apart, hands up, weight on the balls of his feet. This was muscle memory, drilled into him through thousands of hours of training. He looked like what he was, a professional fighter. "Whenever you're ready," Bruce said quietly. Robert didn't rush. He circled slowly, maintaining his guard, looking for an opening. This was smart fighting. Patient. Controlled. Exactly what you'd expect from a trained military combatant. The crowd watched in absolute silence. You could hear the squeak of Robert's shoes on the gymnasium floor. Then Robert committed. He stepped forward with a quick jab. Not his full power, but fast and technically sound. It was a test, a way to gauge Bruce's response. What happened next? Most people in that room couldn't fully process until it was over. Bruce's hand moved. Not a block, not a parry, but a deflection so subtle it barely looked like movement at all. The jab went past Bruce's head, missing by inches, in the same motion, and this is where it got hard to follow. Bruce stepped inside Robert's guard, his right hand coming up in a palm strike that stopped 1 inch from Robert's throat. Robert froze. He was still in his jab's follow-through, completely off balance. If Bruce had wanted to, that palm strike would have crushed his windpipe. But Bruce didn't strike. He just held his hand there, demonstrating the opening. You see, Bruce said quietly. Only Robert could hear. Your jab left you open. Now you're off balance. Your weight is too far forward. I could strike your throat, your eyes, your groin. You have no defense from this position. Bruce stepped back, resetting to his neutral position. Try again. Robert, to his credit, didn't get angry or embarrassed. He was a soldier, a professional. He could learn from mistakes. He reset his stance, more careful this time. His second attack came faster. A combination, jab cross, the kind of 1-2 punch that had probably ended dozens of bar fights in training sessions. It was quick, powerful, and technically correct. Bruce moved like water. There's no other way to describe it. He didn't block the punches or dodge them in the traditional sense. He flowed around them, his body shifting just enough that each strike passed through empty air. And then, while Robert was still mid-combination, Bruce tapped him, just tapped him. 3 light touches. Floating rib, solar plexus, chin delivered so quickly, they seemed simultaneous. They weren't strikes, just touches, but each one landed on a vital point. Each one said, I could have ended this here. Robert stepped back, breathing hard now. Not from exertion, but from the cognitive dissonance of what was happening. He was a trained fighter. He had defeated men in actual combat. How was this small Chinese instructor making him look like a beginner? Again, Robert said, his jaw set. Pride was kicking in now. Bruce shook his head. Robert, you're a good fighter, but you're fighting the way you were trained. Linear, powerful, committed. Every attack you throw, you believe in it. You put your weight behind it. This makes you strong but predictable. Then how do I hit you? Robert asked, frustration creeping into his voice. You don't, Bruce said simply. Not the way you're thinking. You want to know the difference between military combat training and martial arts? Military training teaches you to defeat an enemy. Martial arts teaches you to become water. You're trying to hit the water, Robert. But water doesn't fight back. It just flows around you. This philosophical talk wasn't what Robert came for. He wanted proof, not poetry. His face hardened. One more time. Full speed. I won't hold back. The crowd tensed. This was getting dangerous. Bruce's expression didn't change. If that's what you need, come. What happened next lasted 8 seconds. But in those 8 seconds, 200 people witnessed something that would become legend. Robert Harris charged, not a technical attack, not a measured combination, but a full aggressive assault. He was 220 pounds of military-trained muscle, moving at full speed. Every technique he knew flowing together, punches, a knee strike, even an attempted grapple. This was what he'd been trained for, overwhelming force, aggressive dominance, finishing the fight quickly. Bruce Lee didn't fight back. He simply wasn't there. Every punch hit air. The knee strike found nothing. When Robert tried to grapple, he grabbed empty space. Bruce flowed around every attack like he could see it coming before it happened. His movements were minimal, economical, almost lazy-looking in their efficiency. He wasted nothing, and then in a motion so fast that half the room missed it, Bruce struck, one kick. A side kick delivered from less than a foot away, his leg snapping out and back so quickly it looked like a camera trick. It caught Robert Harris directly in the solar plexus. Not full power. Bruce pulled it significantly, but enough. Robert's eyes went wide. His breath left his body in an audible whoosh. He staggered backward 3 steps and dropped to one knee, gasping, his hand clutching his chest. 8 seconds. From Robert's charge to Robert on his knee. 8 seconds. The gymnasium was absolutely silent. Bruce Lee stood there, his expression unchanged, not even breathing hard. He walked over to Robert and offered his hand. Robert, still gasping, looked up at this small Chinese man who had just dismantled him without breaking a sweat. Robert took the hand. Bruce helped him to his feet. "Are you okay?" Bruce asked, genuine concern in his voice. Robert nodded, still catching his breath. When he could finally speak, he said, "I didn't even see that kick." "I know," Bruce said. "That's the point. In a real fight, your opponent doesn't see what ends the fight. It's too fast, too direct. All that technique, all that form, in a real confrontation, it disappears. What remains is pure economy of motion." Robert stood there for a moment, processing what had just happened. Then, in front of 200 people, this military-trained combat instructor did something unexpected. He bowed, a full, respectful martial arts bow. "I apologize," Robert said. "You were right. I was wrong. That was incredible." Bruce returned the bow. "You have nothing to apologize for. Skepticism is healthy. Testing claims is smart. You just learned something today, that's all. The question is, do you want to learn more?" Robert looked surprised. "You'd teach me after I challenged you?" "Of course," Bruce said, his face breaking into a genuine smile. "You asked an honest question. You were willing to test it physically. That takes courage. Those are exactly the qualities I look for in a student." The crowd, which had been holding its collective breath, suddenly erupted in applause. Not polite demonstration applause, but genuine, excited cheering. They had just witnessed something none of them had ever seen before, a real confrontation between two trained fighters, where one had completely dominated without malice, without ego, without even trying to humiliate his opponent. Robert Harris became Bruce Lee's student the following week. He trained with Bruce for 2 years before military deployment took him overseas. Years later, in interviews, Robert would describe that 8-second encounter as the moment I realized I knew nothing about fighting. I thought fighting was about being strong, being aggressive, being willing to take hits to land hits. Robert said in a 1992 interview, "Bruce showed me that real fighting is about being smarter, faster, and more efficient than your opponent. It's not about toughness, it's about intelligence." But that night in 1964, after the demonstration ended and the crowd dispersed, Bruce Lee sat alone in the gymnasium for a few minutes. One of his students, Jesse Glover, asked him what he was thinking about. "I was thinking," Bruce said, "that I almost hurt that man. Not physically. The kick was controlled. But I almost hurt his pride, his sense of self. He's a Marine. He's been trained to protect people, to be strong, to never back down. And in 8 seconds I made him question all of that." "But you were respectful," Jesse pointed out. "You offered to teach him." "Yes," Bruce agreed, "but respect after defeat is cold comfort. What I should have done, what I will do next time, is find a way to teach without humiliating, victory without destroying. That's the real martial arts." Jesse was confused. "You won. He challenged you. You had every right. Rights don't matter." Bruce interrupted gently. "What matters is the outcome. I wanted him to learn. I wanted everyone in that room to understand that martial arts is effective. I achieved that goal. But at what cost? That man's ego, his confidence. A better way would have been to demonstrate without dominating." This conversation reveals something crucial about Bruce Lee that often gets lost in the legend. He wasn't just a fighter. He was a teacher, a philosopher, constantly questioning not just techniques but the ethics and philosophy behind them. The story of the 8-second challenge spread quickly through the Seattle martial arts community. Within weeks, it had been told and retold, often exaggerated. Some versions had Bruce fighting 5 Marines. Some had the fight lasting 30 seconds. Some had Bruce knocking the Marine unconscious. Bruce hated this. "The story is being told wrong," he complained to his students. "People focus on the fight. They miss the point. The point isn't that I won. The point is why I won. It's not about me being special. It's about the principles being correct." He started using the incident as a teaching tool in his classes. He'd have students attack him, then stop, and explain exactly where their attack failed, where they left openings, how their own commitment to power undermined their effectiveness. Robert Harris was a good fighter. Bruce would tell his classes, "Better than most people you'll ever meet." But he was trained for warfare, not for martial arts. In war, you have weapons, you have numbers, you have support. Hand-to-hand combat is a last resort. So military training emphasizes aggression, power, finishing quickly. It works in that context. But in a one-on-one confrontation with no weapons, different context requires different approach. The 8-second challenge also influenced Bruce's developing philosophy of Jeet Kune Do. He realized that traditional martial arts spent too much time on form and not enough on practical application, but military combat training went too far in the other direction. All application, no philosophy or refinement. Jeet Kune Do would be different. It would take the effectiveness of combat training but refine it with the precision and philosophy of martial arts. Practical but not brutal. Efficient but not reckless. Effective but not excessive. Robert Harris, for his part, became one of Bruce Lee's most dedicated students. He learned that his military training was excellent for what it was designed for: group combat, armed conflict, overwhelming force scenarios. But Bruce taught him a different kind of combat: personal, precise, psychological. Bruce taught me that fighting isn't about winning, Robert said years later. It's about ending the confrontation with the minimum necessary force. Sometimes that means walking away. Sometimes that means controlling without striking. And sometimes, yes, it means an 8-second demonstration that ends the threat without causing real harm. The story eventually reached Hollywood, where Bruce was trying to break into the film industry. Producers were skeptical of his abilities. After all, on-screen fighting is choreographed, controlled, safe. Could this small Chinese instructor really fight? Or was it all just Asian mysticism and showmanship? Then someone mentioned the Marine incident. Suddenly, producers were interested. This wasn't just an instructor claiming to know martial arts. This was a guy who had publicly, in front of 200 witnesses, demonstrated his abilities against a trained military combatant. That was marketable. That was real. But Bruce was frustrated by this too. They don't care about my philosophy, he complained to his wife Linda. They don't care about my teaching methods or my approach to martial arts. They just want to know if I can really fight. As if fighting is all that matters. Linda, always practical, pointed out, but it gets you in the door. Once you're in, you can show them everything else. She was right. The 8-second challenge became part of Bruce Lee's reputation, the proof that he wasn't just talk. And that reputation helped him land roles, first as Kato in The Green Hornet, then eventually in films where he could showcase not just his fighting ability but his philosophy, his humor, his humanity. Looking back now, the 8-second challenge represents something larger than just Bruce Lee defeating a Marine. It represents the moment when Eastern martial arts proved themselves to Western skepticism, not through mysticism or cultural tradition, but through direct, observable, testable demonstration. Robert Harris asked a fair question. Does Kung Fu work in a real fight? Bruce Lee answered with 8 seconds of undeniable proof, and in doing so, he opened the door for martial arts to be taken seriously in America, not as exotic cultural practices, but as legitimate effective combat systems. The gymnasium in Seattle is gone now, demolished decades ago to make room for a parking structure. Most of the 200 witnesses are probably gone too, or too old to remember clearly. Robert Harris passed away in 2003. A retired Marine Corps colonel who practiced Jeet Kune Do until the end of his life. But the story remains. 8 seconds that changed 2 lives. One man learned his limits, another proved his worth. 8 seconds that demonstrated a principle. Real skill doesn't need to prove itself with excessive force. It proves itself with precision, efficiency, and restraint. 8 seconds that showed the world Bruce Lee was not a performer, not a demonstrator, not a movie star, not yet. Anyway, he was a fighter. A real one, and sometimes that's all the proof you need.